Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. In our last video, we discussed the subject of fuzzing and code review. In this video, we're gonna discuss some of the most common types of security vulnerabilities, what they look like, and how to execute them. Let's start by going back to the definition of a security vulnerability. A security vulnerability is a flaw or weakness in a system that can be used to make the system perform actions that it was not intended to do, like allowing access to unauthorized users or revealing personal data. Some common vulnerabilities include XSS, SQL injection, authentication bypass, privilege escalation, and the most dangerous one of them all, remote code execution. Of course, there are other types of vulnerabilities, but for today we're gonna focus on these three main types. Now let's go over these. XSS, cross-site scripting. A security vulnerability attack found in web applications that is used to provide malicious script, generally in the form of a browser-side script, to a different user. That user's browser has no way of knowing that the script is malicious and will execute it as if it was a benign script. This attack occurs when a web application utilizes the user's provided data without filtering or escaping it. There are basically three types of cross-site scripting attacks: reflected, stored, and DOM-based. Let's look at a simple example of a stored XSS. Suppose a website has a comment section. Users submit their comments using an HTTP request looking like this. After this comment is submitted, any user who visits the site will see the following within the application response. If the website doesn't perform any filtering or escaping of this data, a security researcher can submit a malicious comment like this. Within the researcher's request, the comment will be encoded with a URL that looks like this. Now, any user who visits the website will receive the following content within the application's response. At this point, the malicious JavaScript code will execute in the victim's browser, allowing the researcher to perform any action that the victim can perform, like viewing and modifying information, interacting with other users, or performing malicious actions that would seem to have come from the victim. An XSS attack can also provide a hacker with access to the user's cookies, impersonation of the user itself, changing the HTML page, or even accessing other sensitive information he may have, making this attack a very risky one. Now let's move on to SQL injection. SQL injection, a vulnerability that allows a researcher to modify SQL queries made to the application's database. This gives the researcher the ability to compromise the process itself. Let's take a look at an SQL injection. Suppose a website application evaluates the user and password parameters provided by the user against the website database, such as in the case of a login form. A researcher can easily insert an SQL syntax into this statement, like the one on the screen, if the application doesn't sanitize users' input. In this case, the researcher used admin single quote semicolon dash dash as his username. The combination of single quote caused the SQL to interrupt the subsequent semicolon as a directive that the statement has ended. The double hyphen instructs the SQL parser that the rest of the SQL is a comment and should not be executed, thus removing the need for password verification and returning a dataset of the admin. Now, the researcher can log in with an administrator account without having a password. This is effectively an authentication bypass. Security researchers can also use an SQL injection in order to compromise user data, their and others, along with modifying existing records found in the database. In extreme cases, a researcher can also delete information from the database itself. Now let's discuss RC. RC comes in two styles: remote command execution and remote code execution. While the main goal of both attacks is to change the execution flow of a given system, in this video we will only discuss remote command execution. So, remote command execution. a vulnerability where a researcher's input is injected and executed by the system as if it was the intended command to run. This type of vulnerability can let the researcher change the behavior and flow of the system being attacked. You can cause an RC if there's an option for users' input to be processed inside a function that executes commands, like an application that allows users to ping a given hostname or an IP address. Here's an example of a possible RC. An application wants to give users the ability to test whether a hostname or an IP address is reachable. Since hostname or the IP address value is user-controlled, a security researcher can provide something like this. And the resulting command that the Python code will run will look like so, which will do two things. First, initiate a ping against 127.0.0.1, and after 5 ping attempts, it will shut down the system, since it will run the second part of the command the researcher provided as well. Remote command execution grants the ability to issue system commands, connect to databases, read, write, or even delete local files, potentially jeopardizing many users. And that's it for today's video. You can find additional materials on everything we discussed today in the description below. Subscribe to our channel and make sure you keep up with our latest publications. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you in the next video.